And when I was there only a few days ago in Iran, and I spoke to the friends and family members and others in Iranian society, yes, they had grievances about economy, but they said that's our issue. It's nothing to do with the United States or any other country in the world. We will deal with it ourselves, and no one has a right to threaten our leader.
Now, the world and more importantly, Iran last week witnessed another foreign-backed terror attempt aimed at undermining and destabilizing the country's security. A storm the country's people and security forces once again weathered to restore the Islamic Republic back to calm and order, albeit at no small cost. At least 3,117 people were killed, 2,427 of them civilians and security forces. And this came through last night's official statement by the Martyrs Foundation. President Masoud Pezeshkian today earlier said that what the U.S. and Israel failed to achieve in their cowardly 12-day June aggression against Iran, they tried to achieve last week through arming terrorists on our streets in revenge. Now, this developing story, its many layers and ongoing threats of military force and political pressure leveled against the country is the focus of our Spotlight program. But first, let's watch this quick report.
Iran has released the official death toll from the recent foreign-backed terrorist attacks in the country, saying that 2,427 civilians and security forces were martyred. Among them, 15 individuals who were tragically burned entirely by fire. The Foundation of Martyrs and Veterans Affairs said 690 terrorists were also killed. Iran's Security Council says the height of the violence occurred on January 8 and 9, revealing an unprecedented level of brutality. It said terrorists shot indiscriminately at anyone in the streets, passerbys and protesters alike, to manufacture casualties and provide a pretext for the U.S. President Donald Trump. It said terrorist elements engaged in Daesh-style crimes, including beheadings, stabbings, and burning individuals alive. The attacks caused widespread destruction with systematic assaults on shops, banks, mosques, hospitals, ambulances, fire stations, clinics, and public infrastructure. The terrorists engaged in systematic arson attacks, deliberately setting fire to civilian and public infrastructure across the country. They torched 350 mosques, desecrating places of worship. They targeted the economic foundation by burning 750 banks. Emergency and transportation services were severely hit, with 305 ambulances and buses destroyed, along with 253 bus stations and 24 gas stations. In the arson attacks, the terrorists also caused catastrophic damage to civilian infrastructure. According to official figures, they set fire to 700 shops, 200 schools, and 300 private homes. The total devastation indicates a coordinated campaign to dismantle the foundations of daily life and the governance. Intelligence findings suggest this campaign was a direct response to the failure of the 12-day war against the country by the U.S. and the Israeli regime in June last year. Iran says it's taking legal steps against those responsible for the terrorist attacks, namely the U.S., and the Islamic Republic will not compromise on the sovereignty of Iran or its people.
Joining us, Mr. Reza Vedadi, academic, researcher, and author, joining us out of London, and also Ali Mourad, a political commentator and writer, joining us for Lebanese capital, Beirut. Gentlemen, hello to both of you, and welcome to you both to our Spotlight program here. Pleasure to have you both on. I guess, Reza, we'll start with you out there in London since you're farther from us. So we heard a number of Iranian officials now refer to this recent terror campaign as an extension of the U.S.-Israeli 12-day war back in June. Today, it was also echoed once again by Masoud Pezeshkian, but we've heard it from a number of both military brass and political elite. That DC's and Tel Aviv's intelligence security assessments even reached a conclusion that their attacks alone will not break the country's will. So they obviously try to get on the streets and get dirty, and they thought they might have some success there. Your initial take, please.
Yes, without doubt, Iran prepared itself for such a mercenary terrorism-led incidents, I think, after the Mahsa Amini riots that were orchestrated also by the CIA and Mossad. And after the 12-day war, I think Iran had realized that there is really no path of negotiation with the United States, or, to be frank, with the Europeans. And so Iran, and that's why if you look at the comments by the Iranian commanders, the military commanders, they have stated that any war that takes place now will be the ultimate war, in the sense that it will be a full-blown war. It won't, they won't cease military activities after a few days if Israel begs for ceasefire like it did last time. So I think Iranians have noticed that the United States cannot be negotiated or bargained or reasoned with. They want the full destruction of the Islamic Republic, and further also the disintegration and balkanization of the Iranian country, so that it can then have access to its resources, as it's trying to do in Venezuela, as it's trying to do in Greenland and other parts of the world. So I think Iranians have sat down and planned for this. The plan has worked. They cut off the internet. The terrorists couldn't get directions and instructions on how to proceed, and they managed to gather all this up. And when I was there only a few days ago in Iran, and I spoke to the friends and family members and others in Iranian society, yes, they had grievances about economy, but they said that's our issue. It's nothing to do with the United States or any other country in the world. We will deal with it ourselves, and no one has a right to threaten our leader. And also they went on further saying that we know that the internet blackout causes us problems, but we also know that without the internet blackout and the planning of the government, the mercenaries and the terrorists would have done much more damage.
All right, bud. Thanks for that. Your opening thoughts. Ali Mourad, thank you for your patience there, pal. Welcome to the conversation. So after 3,117 dead, Ali, in just a few days, practically 48 going on 72 hours, 2,427 ordinary people, volunteer forces, cops, and security personnel. This is perhaps one could consider a very hefty price to hear, and then hear rhetoric from the U.S. and Israeli regime to ascertain beyond a reasonable doubt that they were in fact involved and behind this acts of chaos and violence. How do you assess this being part of the extension of the 12-day war in June that we hear from so many different officials now?
Well, first of all, we have to take note that during those incidents that took place in Iran during the last 3 weeks, it's obvious that it's uncomparable when it comes to the numbers of the killed and the injured, and as well as the vandalized properties to any other events that took place in Iran. I'm talking about the events that took place in 2009 and 2022. So the foreign interference here is very obvious. Also, if you take a look to the numbers of the martyrs and including the security forces and the civilians, and you compare it to the numbers of the terrorists and the agents that were using guns and shotguns and various tools to do the terror in the streets of the Iranian cities, well, it's obvious that the civilians and the security forces, they have been assassinated and killed. So the party here that was conducting violence was the agents who were supported and aided and pushed by the Americans and the Zionists. So this refutes all the claims made by U.S. mainstream media as well as European media too, that there has been brutal force used by the government inside the streets of the Iranian cities. And it proves that the hypocrisy and the double standards they are using in the misinformation campaign that has been waged on Iran during the last 3 weeks. I think that Iran proved today, after the issuance of the statistics and the numbers of the injured and the martyrs and the killed, that Iran was facing an aggression, a new form of aggression that took place. It's not actually new because we have seen in 2022 something like that, but it was on a minimum level. Right now, I think after you listen to the statements made by U.S. officials confessing about their role in the orchestrated events in Iran, especially what the U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, what he said yesterday on the World Economic Forum, it was actually it's so bold because he was confessing that they were the ones who put pressure on the Iranian currency to to make those events take place inside Iran, to push people to protest in the streets, and of course to use their other agents who were being aided and supported. And we learned today that most of those terrorists they came from Kurdistan, from the northern part of Iraq. They went into the borders. Of course, there are separatists here who were ready to play the role of the agents and the terrorists inside Iran. It proves that the numbers prove that the local, the domestic terrorism is more dangerous than the outside terrorism imposed by aggressive states like the United States or the Zionist regime, because
we've heard this before.
It hits the society, the inside of Iran. That's why the Trump administration have been counting on those agents and terrorists.
Thank you, Ali. And Reza, back to you. We have to underscore and highlight nations' unity once again. Why? Because beyond Iran's missiles and drones and other some crude, but mostly very sophisticated level of deterrence capacity, the country has, for the most part, indigenously put together over the past nearly 5 decades now, are its people. Possibly the one factor that has, over the decades, always been part of the biggest miscalculation by Iran's adversary, its people's fortitude and unity.
That's correct. I mean, if you look at the uprisings in or the instigations of regime change in Libya, and the same thing in Syria, you find that the people were not as their foresight in seeing the enemy's hand was not as the ability was not the same as the Iranians. And I think that also goes back to the leadership of Iran. One thing that has been very stable in the last 30 years, 35 years or 37 years since Ayatollah Khamenei has been the leader of the Islamic Revolution is his ability to nurture the population and the establishment's ability to mature as a society. Don't forget, Iran didn't have any elections until 1979. It was ruled by a king dictatorship. And so after the revolution, when Imam Khomeini came into power as a leader guiding the country, there was elections for parliament, for the presidency, and this continued. So the leadership enabled the society to mature. And so when the society saw that the genuine protest because of currency fluctuations had been hijacked by agents from outside, terrorists from outside, they came out in their millions. And Ayatollah Khamenei only a few days ago in his speech said that this is like the day of the revolution, the 22nd of Bahman, where the people came in force and demonstrated not only to themselves and to the Iranian society, but to the whole world that they're against what the outside world is trying to do. Whatever issues they have, it will be dealt with internally in the sense that, protests and disagreements about policy regarding economy, but no outside force, especially a country that wants the destruction of the Iranian society like Israel and USA is permitted to interfere and enter. And they showed that in their millions. Not only in Tehran alone, there was several million people, let alone the cities outside. And so I think the Americans and the enemies of Iran saw this, and they decided to change tact, and now they're planning on the next kind of form of attack, where it could be, people are saying that they're going to gather 100,000 terrorists in Syria with Jolani's permission and assistance, and try to then take him to Iraq and then Iran. However, that the internal rioting that they started, that didn't work. The war of the 12 days, that didn't work. So the Iranian people at every single step have demonstrated whatever issues they have economically, it will be dealt with through the democratic system. Protests are permitted, but rioting, as we can see in the videos, and terrorism is not accepted, and they've come out to demonstrate for that.
Thank you, Reza. And Ali, what are we to ascertain from the symmetry, the organization, the method to the madness and the chaos that we witnessed, eerily characteristic of Daesh tactics, hitting civilians and security forces with brutality, beheadings, burning people alive, hitting infrastructure like markets, banks, gas stations, religious sanctities in Husseinias and mosques. What are we to deduce from this? Even things that were characteristic of different, same exact copied in different areas of one town, and also several towns at once.
Well, of course, those who know the culture and the traditions and the cultural identity of the Iranian people, they all know that no Iranian can go to torch fire in a shrine, for example, or even a mosque, or even to set fire in Quran copies. So I think this is a proof of the external factor here. We are, even if you go to check the way they killed the innocents and the security forces. A friend told me today that a Passage individual was killed with stabs using a sharp tool. Actually, they counted, he told me, we counted hundreds of stabs in his body, which means that so those individuals who were carrying out this terror, they were abnormal, maybe. Of course, it proves the how the the rhythm of the crimes they have been carrying out. It looks like other examples that we have seen during the last decade, especially in Syria. Of course, when you take a look to what happened in a case in northern Iran, I think in Rasht, where a security force was beheaded, these are the works of ISIS. We have seen this in Iraq. We have seen this in Syria. And we all know that ISIS was aided by the Americans. This is what Donald Trump himself talked about in 2016. So that's why I think the brutality and the much of the extent of the violence that took place in some cases proves that the purpose, the actual purpose, was to terrorize the people, to prevent them from expressing their will, their opinion about regarding the their support to the regime and the revolution in the end. I think those actions, which we have proofs, many proofs, including statements, of course, the authorities in Tehran, they got information, solid information about the role of the Americans, the Zionists, and unfortunately some neighboring countries, because we learned today that those terrorists were communicating using some routers, which are manufactured, for example, in the United Arab Emirates. I'm talking about the DU routers, which were used in a bigger scale, more than the Starlink receivers. And this is a dangerous precedent, I think. It proves that the neighboring countries were completely complicit, some neighboring states, in this act of terror. It actually, could be pursued legally and internationally, and that's what we learned today.
Thank you, Ali. We only have a couple of minutes. I want to get this last question out to Reza, if I can. These threats of military force against Iran by the U.S. and Reza, same players that have lobbied and imposed sweeping, at times the unilateral sweeping sanctions against Iran, the Iranian people, sanctions that have severely impacted their livelihoods, their quality of life, that have drawn desperate people to the streets. You mentioned the failing currency as a result, that have morphed into protests the CIA and the Mossad then manipulate and exploit into violent mayhem. And then we see crocodile tears from their leaders and the instigation of more violence that they use as pretext now to threaten Iran. I mean, that's violence that they propagated and perpetrated. They're now using as pretext to attack the country.
It's funny because if you look at the Europeans, because of the riots and the terrorism, which they call protesting, that they want to bring more sanctions to Iran. And they don't accept that the sanctions that they're bringing is causing the hardship that the people are trying to protest against. And it's interesting because they have their arguments with Donald Trump over Greenland and tariffs. But when it comes to Iran, somehow President Macron texts or sends a message to Donald Trump that we have great things in plan for Iran. So it seems that the enmity of the West, of the Europeans, United States, and the proxies against Iran goes far beyond any disagreements that they have with each other. And they use these riots and protests that they engineer themselves to bring more pressure and more sanctions onto Iran. And their ultimate aim, if you look at all the policies that they've had, all the white papers that they put out, is to reduce Iran's influence and also to balkanize Iran so that it no longer provides a barrier against Israel.
You guys, time has gotten the better of us. I want to thank you both sincerely for joining us on the program. Reza Vedadi, they're joining us from London, and Mr. Ali Mourad joining us from Beirut. And viewers, this brings us to the end of your Spotlight program. Thank you for tuning in, and goodbye for now.